This is not a rant. This is an audit. And so let me start there. This conversation is not about blame. It's not about nostalgia, and it's not about who did what first. It's about patterns. Because when we see something happening over and over and over again across industries, decades, platforms, this is not a coincidence. This is structure. So here's the pattern. What we've seen is that Black culture shows up first, then ownership shows up later, and somewhere in between, the control begins to shift. We've seen this story after story. Communities build language, we have humor, we have rhythm, we have critique, we have connection. That's not a business model. That's not content. That's just the way that the culture exists. That's the way the culture has survived, thrived, and signaled for hundreds of years. But then the scale arrives. And then we get the platforms, we get the policies, we get the brands. Intruders come in and want to pull away from the culture and make something different. And then suddenly it becomes the same behaviors that were ignored before. It's called engagement now. The same conversations become traffic and the same creativity becomes value. But here's the question. When the people who built the signal rarely own the system that amplifies it, that's when we have to call it what it is. And that's gentrification. And whether that's digital gentrification or whether it's physical gentrification, it's the same thing. Now, it doesn't look like eviction. It doesn't look like terms of service. It looks like algorithms. It looks like monetization without individuals having governance or without individuals having say-so. And so today we're going to talk about what we call shadow equity. Welcome to another episode of I Take Your Point podcast. I am John Dunson, joined by my co-host who has way too many last names. Thank you guys for joining us. Before we jump in, I want to congratulate my co-host on making it on time today. She did a good job. She was only 5 minutes late for recording, so that's an improvement. So thank you. Ms. Lynn?
People that are late are optimistic people because they really truly believe they're going to make it. So they have this optimism that they can do everything and still make it. So they're very optimistic people. So you're welcome.
All right. So thank you. All right, let's jump right in. First of all, this is not a rant. This is an audit. And so let me start there. This conversation is not about blame. It's not about nostalgia, and it's not about who did what first. It's about patterns. Because when we see something happening over and over and over again across industries, across decades, across platforms, this is not a coincidence. This is structure. So here's the pattern. What we've seen is that Black culture shows up first, then ownership shows up later, and somewhere in between, the control begins to shift. We've seen this story after story. Communities build language, we have humor, we have rhythm, we have critique, we have connection. And that's not a business model. That's not content. That's just the way that the culture exists. That's the way that the culture has survived and thrived and signaled for hundreds of years. But then the scale arrives. And then we get the platforms, we get the policies, we get the brands. The intruders come in and want to pull away from the culture and make something different. And then suddenly it becomes the same behaviors that were ignored before. It's called engagement now. The same conversations become traffic and the same creativity becomes value. But here's the question. When the people who built the signal rarely own the system that amplifies it, that's when we have to call it what it is. And that's gentrification. And whether that's digital gentrification or physical gentrification, it's the same thing. Now, it doesn't look like eviction. It doesn't look like terms of service. It looks like algorithms. It looks like monetization without individuals having governance or without individuals having say-so. And so today we're going to talk about what we call shadow equity. And that is the culmination of the conversations that we've been having. We started with looking at Black women and how Black women were paid less for what it is and how it is that they show up and do work. And we talked about the shaming of the body with respect to Black women in culture. And we talked about digital gentrification, and most recently we talked about policies that are enacted that will hold Black people back, places of employment. But before we dig into that today, I wanted to again thank my wonderful co-host for engaging with a lot of you on the social platforms, and want to thank you for that. Lynn, anything you want to add?
It's the same thank you as before. Thanks for engaging. Thanks for showing up. Thanks for lending your voice and sharing your experiences.
All right, so let's dive into it. Let's start with the culture. Lynn, when's the last time you were at a barbershop?
A couple of weeks ago, I usually take my oldest son to get his hair cut.
Okay. What was that experience like?
It's a barbershop where I could take my oldest son to go get his hair cut. I don't know what you want me to say.
When you're in the barbershop and you're hearing the language that's discussed in the barbershop, what's the thing that comes to mind?
I don't know, John, because honestly, I don't like being in the barbershop, so I usually am listening to an audiobook. So I can't answer these questions. I don't know what you're trying to get at, but I'm not the person to answer the question for you because I don't want to be in there. I listen to an audiobook and I don't partake in their conversation. So you want to try a different example?
Okay, so when you go to a hair salon, you can't use that one either. When you did go to a hair salon, what was that experience like?
I still go to a hair salon, and it's, as I said, traumatic because I don't want to be in there either. What are you trying to get at, John? Let's do that. Let's get to the example that you're trying to get at
Well,
because
the example
the two that you tried aren't going to align with me.
okay, so let's use the black church. What was your experience like with that?
Again, let's go ahead and try something that's going to resonate with me. Maybe you need a new co-host because the ones that you're trying to come up with, you got the wrong girl.
Okay, all right, so you were talking about your experience at the family reunion. What was that experience like?
My experience there.
Yeah.
What do you mean? I understand where you're getting.
The culture is how it is that the culture, specifically black culture, how language is formed in the culture and how communication happens. So the question is, when you're attending things such as the black family reunion, the church, the barbershop, you're listening to black radio and things of that sort, there's a certain language and cadence that's a part of the culture and how stories are shared that informs everything that comes after.
That's so interesting because I've never put a distinction and I've never thought of it like, oh, I'm in a black space. And so let me be more intentional and let me pick up on these things. I'm just in this space and I'm interacting with people. I've never, ever thought, oh, I'm here and now I'm going to do this. I'm just there and then I do that. I've never put that distinction out. So I was just struggling to understand where you were coming with this because I don't think that, maybe it's just me, I don't feel like now that I'm at a black church that now I am picking up on things, I'm learning things, I'm just engaging with life. I do that in every environment that I'm in.
Yeah, I will push back on that from my experience, not necessarily your experience because we have different experiences. So when I think about the black church, specifically growing up AMA, African American Episcopal, and even Baptist church, there's this thing called the call and response. And you saw it a little bit with Obama, where Obama would say certain things and the audience would respond a certain way. And in some ways, it would be very vocal in terms of how the audience responded. And that cadence in terms of that call and response, that came out of the culture. Go to a black barbershop. I remember growing up and getting a haircut every Saturday. And that's where you learn a lot about politics and the news. You learn a lot about elections. You learn a lot about sports. You learn a lot about life choices in the barbershop. So in some ways, that institution served as a safe haven for black men to go in and have those conversations and not be shy about voicing their opinions and thoughts on certain things. And so I say all that to say the black culture traditionally has used institutions like the church, like the barbershop, like radio. You can think about the 1960s where the civil rights movement in and of itself was fueled a lot by black radio. To Say It Loud, I'm Black and I'm Proud with P. Green in DC and how it is that he was able to be the voice of the movement in terms of the black community for black radio. I say all that to say that the culture comes first and then the culture informs what then drives policy. And so that's where I'm going with it. That makes
Interesting, because I think that, and maybe I just need to think about this a little bit more, but like the call and response, cheerleading, right? There's a call and response. And so I don't necessarily associate that with black culture. I associate it with just different activities. As a cheerleader, when I say this, you say that. Like, it's just, I've never associated that with a black experience.
So think about the term the griot and how in the African communities, you always had the storytelling. You were talking a couple of weeks ago about how you love to spend time with your big mama because she would share stories with you. And that oral tradition of storytelling is something that has been a linchpin in the African American community.
But it's also been a part of just the human experience, right? So you could think about the bards in the, I don't know, hundreds. I obviously don't know geography, history, or anything, but they're the bards or the people that would go to the different villages and sing or do poetry or Shakespeare acting, because they're providing a story and they're telling the legacy of people. And it's not something that I think that is unique to the black culture. That's why I was struggling a little bit. Where are you going with this?
I disagree with that. I
really?
fundamentally disagree with
How is
that.
that?
Because Because if you think in terms of the tradition of the griot and storytelling, and you think of oral history and sharing language, whether it's the African American culture or whether it's the indigenous people, that has been the bedrock of the culture.
How do you think the Bible got here? Do you think that they had an internet? It was also storytelling. It was people telling stories and then they captured it, or some of the stories, in a book. So it's been around forever. I don't associate it with just Black culture. I think it's embedded in the Black culture, but I don't think the Black culture invented it.
You literally said the Bible and the Black culture, they're the same thing.
Okay, the Bible and the Black culture. So the Bible is something, okay, so we're getting ready to get into something extremely deep. I think we're going to go off onto a tangent. But it's something that that's the only way that stories would have been able to be told, is through storytelling, through people sitting around a fire or going village to village. Like, there's no phone, there's no internet. So I don't see how this is unique to the Black culture.
Jesus was Black.
Okay, John, thank you for that.
So for you to say the Black culture, then...
Thank you, John.
All right, so I say all that to say that when you talk about the culture existing first, the culture then leads to policies. And what we have seen over the course of recent days specifically is a rollback in terms of some policies that were put in place because of some issues that the culture had. Meaning, if you think about DEI, we'd be ignorant not to look at the rollback of DEI and how it is that this current administration uses that and has used that as a cudgel against the minority community. What say you about that?
That's interesting. And this is going to be something that's completely different from my normal position that I take. I'm gonna do something that usually breaks me out in hives. I'm gonna talk about math. This is your lane. So what I'm hearing, and you correct me if I misunderstood, but what I'm hearing is that it's against the culture. For corporations that are going away from DEI, I really think, or I would like for you to consider, is it really about morality and against the culture, or is it more about risk exposure and reallocation of that risk? So think about this. And from 2020 to 2022, Floyd, the whole thing, there was a response from corporations, and it was specifically because the culture and people were mobilizing and not buying because we felt that there was misrepresentation in corporations. And so corporations were like, yes, we're going to have DEI initiatives, Black Lives Matters on every single vessel in this building. And then from 2023 to 2026, corporations looked at the landscape. So they were facing legal challenges, race-conscious programs, court rulings, limited affirmative action, all of these things. And so they adjusted and reallocated that risk, where some of them didn't necessarily get rid of their DEI programs. They just renamed it so that they minimized the risk to the corporation. And some of them got rid of it altogether.
Okay, so I take your point there. I'd reframe it this way. So DEI in its early stages was about numbers in terms of representation for a specific subgroup. Specifically, we were talking about sex and race. DEI, as it was originally mandated, was to make certain that a certain number of minorities, a certain number of women were included in the ranks of X, Y, and Z. When DEI shifted to be about inclusion and belonging, then it shifted into something else. It shifted from becoming what you talked about with respect to race-specific goals, or I'm talking about with respect to race-specific goals, to the aspirational aspects of we want to make certain that we have equity and inclusion across the ranks of the corporation. And that then allowed corporations to go, okay, we can do that. But if we do that, then Chad is not going to have this job. And we're going to open ourselves up to the legal lawsuit of Chad saying, now you are discriminating against me. And that's what you're referring to with respect to it now becoming more about risk aversion as opposed to about gender equality.
Well, I think it goes hand in hand, and it's not risk aversion, it's reallocating the risk. And so
No,
they're
it's risk
again,
aversion. If I don't want the lawsuit, that's risk.
nobody want, of course, corporations are going to look at the bottom line. And a lot of times we will take it personally that it's against the culture because it's against the culture. But they're looking at the bottom line. What's the culture? What is the political climate? What's the climate look like? Where is it going? And if you do have an administration that's, again, not all keen on affirmative action, DEI, whatever, they are opening themselves up to lawsuits. So again, it's not morality. And the thing about this that I find interesting is DEI, affirmative action. Again, if we want to go back to the call and response, it was never ingrained into the organization's fiber. There was never equity. We thought that we were getting something, but if it's easily taken away, it was never ingrained, because you can't take something away that's part of the fiber of a corporation. It was never part of that. It was a call and response. It is, you know what it reminds me of? It's okay, I'm going to do like an analogy. I mean, you did a little monologue at the beginning, so stick with me here. All right, so it's like if you meet somebody and they're like, hey, move to, I don't know, Georgia. Move to Georgia. You move to Georgia and you pack up your shit. You are like, I'm going to move. I'm going to upend my life. I'm going to leave my family. I'm going to change my job. I'm going to move halfway across the country because of this love. And then, but you don't have any ring. You have no shared assets. You have no written commitment. Is it devotion or an unsecured risk? And so when we had DEI, we had affirmative action. We didn't have any equity in that company. We had a promise. We had something on paper, but it was never part of the value system, anything. What I would have liked, instead of DEI things, is having more representation on the board. So more Black people on the board, more Black people making decisions about hiring practices and how equity is distributed. Because we've never had anything. We just had a promise, just like that person moving across the country. That other person could be like, you know what, now that you got here, I don't like the way that you put towels all over the floor, and so I'm out. And then with DEI and corporations, they're like, oh, the wind has changed, the political wind's changed, you're out. Because you never had equity in that company in the first place. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think there are two things, though. I think they're separate things. One is what DEI was designed to do, and DEI was designed to provide access and provide visibility.
But I think that
that is different from saying, okay, now that you have visibility, I do agree with you that in a lot of ways, what wasn't asked was, we need to have diversity, equity, and inclusion in not the forward, outward facing roles, but the power roles, meaning that typically we saw DEI in marketing, we saw DEI and human resources. We did not see a lot of DEI with respect to legal, with respect to operations, and with respect to, I think that was the second aspect of what it is and where it is that DEI was headed toward. Now, there are organizations that do focus on that. If you think about the National Urban League, that is the organization that focuses on that component with making certain that Black folks are at the seat of the table with respect to companies and with respect to boards. And so it's not a one size fits all thing. I do take your point with respect to understanding that the initial ask was probably too broad and allow corporations to go, hey, I've let you in. I gave you what you asked for with respect to diversity, equity, and inclusion. You didn't ask for a seat on the board.
So it's more about Black presence and less about Black power. And not to say anything negative about what DEI, because it did some remarkable things and changed a lot of people's lives. But I think that when we start looking at where we're going as a people, starting to think more about ownership and what kind of ownership do we have in this company. One of the things that I always encourage people that I'm either mentoring or, they come into a space and they're like, oh, this job, whatever. I'm like, you know what? Take as much as you can from it. Learn as much as you can. Make sure that you have portable skills that you can take with you. And so that you are not worried about this. This title is nothing. It's absolutely nothing. You know, it's something, the fact that one one of my companies paid for my master's degree and would have paid for my doctorate. The fact that I get all these certifications, take and do everything that you can so that you have portable power. And if they're not giving you equity, which is another thing you should be negotiating for, is equity in the company instead of just a higher salary, ask for ownership in the company. If you're not doing that, and when the budgets shift and they're like, you know what, you're out of here, you have portable skills that you can just take someplace else.
So let's think about DEI and literally the term of DEI. I think we focus so much on the diversity part and the inclusion part that we did not demand, as you say, enough in terms of the equity part. So from that standpoint, I do agree. Now, the argument can be made that the equity comes either from sweat equity or shadow equity, where, and this goes back to the call and response in terms of the culture, because we've always looked at equity as influence. We've always looked at, if I am doing this, and this, I'm putting sweat equity in, I'm putting that shadow equity in, that's behind the scenes that may not be visible. But I'm hoping, and hope is the term here, I'm hoping that I'm going to be compensated for that or made whole for that later on. And what I hear you saying is you want to demand that, you want to flip that DEI and go EDI and then go, okay, now that I have the equity, I now know that I have a valued stake in what happens, and I have a little bit more skin in the game, and you're going to respect me more than the fact that you have a Black woman sitting here. You have a Black woman who's a partner sitting here.
Again, it's about Black presence versus Black power, right? And so even when you put equity first, again, when budgets shift, you still have things that you've taken away from that company. So I always encourage people to start thinking about themselves as a business. So that business is going to make decisions that's good for the corporation, for that business. You also need to make decisions that are good for your business, because you're the CEO of your family, of your life. And so take what you can from the corporation. Waiting for them to compensate you, what is it? Hope in one hand and shit in the other and see which one fills up faster. I don't know. It's something like that. Some Southern nonsense. But it's like you need to take ownership. It's more about who's more responsible, the institution or the individual. At some point, we're going to have to start taking for ourselves and stop waiting for the institutions to give us stuff. Take it.
Hold on. But I'm going to push back here, because I agree with you in theory in terms of what you're saying. But I stand and die on the hill that DEI in its first iteration, because of how it was structured, did a lot of wonderful things for people. The irony is, if you think about DEI, the people that benefit from DEI the most are white women.
That's true. I'm not disputing what you're saying. I think it did, like I said, life-changing things. It gave women more autonomy. It gave them more opportunity. It changed families. What I'm saying is that it wasn't ingrained. Well, it gave white women, it also gave Black women. I benefited as I was able to do some good things as well.
I mean, you're talking about, okay, if you talk about the actual numbers, the numbers.
Right, if we're looking at numbers, right, they benefited more, but I'm not discounting the fact that we all benefited from it. But if you want to look at it, yes, white women benefited more. Great, let's go ahead and put that as a given. What I'm saying is that it was a promise that we held our hat on, and that if we did these things, then we were going to be rewarded. But that hasn't been the case. So what I'm saying is put the equity first and look at yourself as a business. How would you manage your own business? You're going to do the things that are going to allow you portability, things that are going to continue after that budget shifts and they eliminate your position.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would agree that, again, DEI in terms of itself, in terms of how it was originally constructed, is no longer viable. It's not viable for a couple of reasons. It's not viable because it's toxic with respect to how corporations look at it. They've moved it out of the human resources realm to the legal realm. And it is now more of a risk thing than a compliance thing. And so from that standpoint, I do agree that what we have learned, or what we need to take away from that as a culture, is we have to, as you said, demand equity in terms of ownership. And that leads to how it is that when we think about the edutainment aspect, and we think about how it is that Black folk have been able to set themselves up and learn from the culture aspect and learn from the politics aspect, and position themselves to be thought leaders with respect to entertainment. I am fascinated when I look at social media today because I remember a day when we had this thing called Black Planet. Do you remember Black Planet?
Black Planet? Planet?
Black Planet, yeah.
Never heard of such things.
Okay.
Apparently, I didn't have global entry.
No, you did not. Black Planet was the precursor to Facebook. Black Planet back in the late 90s, it was real big in the culture where you could get a Black Planet account and it had the social connections, so you could friend people that you'd met either at college or at work, and it was that whole networking ability, and that was Black Planet. Black Planet was the precursor to Facebook. Mark Zuckerberg took what was working with respect to Black Planet and developed Facebook for the college realm. Do you remember something called Vine?
Again, I did not have global entry. I've never heard of such things.
So Vine was the precursor to TikTok. It was Black creatives developing a way to capture the culture, the sayings, the memes, the facial expressions, and things of that sort, put into like a 5 or 10 second. Some of the stuff that you will now see on Twitter was originated from Vine. And then we obviously talk about Twitter. Twitter would not be Twitter without the thing we call Black Twitter, because Black Twitter made Twitter cool. And so my point in terms of the social media aspect and the ownership aspect is that there's a throughput between Black creatives and the cool factor and the things that are developed being either replicated and monetized or replicated and standardized by individuals without melanin. What say you about that aspect?
What struck me when you were talking is that, I want to get your opinion. I truly do want your opinion on this. So you have this position that these large mega organizations were started from visions that Black people stood up, right? Is that correct?
Yes.
So in your opinion, why were we not able to be the Twitter, be the Facebook? What do you think happened to prevent that large scale expansion of an idea, and why someone else was able to do that?
Yeah, that's a good question. And that's probably something that's going to be studied for years, I should say. I would think access to capital is a huge thing. It's no coincidence that if you think about Zuckerberg and what he was able to do with the twins that helped him found the company, they had access to capital that the individuals who were doing Black Planet may not have had. So in some ways, it's access to capital. In other ways,
John, just quickly, do you think that the founders of Vine looked for capital opportunity? And you may not have. I'm just thinking out loud here. That did they look for opportunities to capitalize on it and make it something bigger, or did they think that this is something that's unique to the culture and we're just doing this for our culture instead of looking globally for expansion? If you think that's the case, then we can't fault a Mark Zuckerberg or the creator of Twitter for taking something and having a bigger vision. So what I hear from you is that when we try and keep everything insulated into the culture, we're doing ourselves a disservice.
Yeah, I'm going to push back on that. I don't think it's about, I'm thinking about having a bigger vision. I think Black folk, in terms of creating, if Black folk are just living and existing, we may not think of it as, okay, I need to monetize this and this is something that we can make into a for-profit industry. I think if we're at fault about something or fault for something, that may be it. But Black folk, by definition or by our history, have shown that we are creatives and that we can come up with something that's going to be sticky or trendy. There have been countless examples of us just existing and all of a sudden someone else sees it and goes, hey, I can take this and I can charge someone $10.
Well, that's the opportunity right there, right? So it's not a lack of talent. It's not a lack of creativity. It's a lack of something. And so again, I'm not going to fault someone for taking an idea and globalizing it. I'm not. What I'm going to say is there's an opportunity in our culture to be that Twitter, be that Mark Zuckerberg.
I will agree with you to a certain point, and I will add fault here. Fault is if I know that Lynn is creative in certain aspects, and I go in and mine what it is that Lynn is doing, and then I take that and add a little seasoning and create it and make it John's, then I've stolen from Lynn.
Can I push back on you? And I want to get a definition from your definition because you love capitalism.
Yes.
Isn't that a cornerstone of capitalism?
In some ways, yes.
Well, you can't say because the color of your skin, you have a different definition of capitalism. Capitalism is capitalism.
I
And
don't
so
think
if
that.
I am going to use the components of capitalism to create a business that's going to make me a multi-billionaire, hey, that's capitalism.
You know what? Maybe, and this is the part that I struggle with respect to being a pure capitalist versus being an individual who believes that there should be a right and a wrong way to go about doing business and
But
having some real talk.
there is a huge gap there.
There is.
And because you can't apply morality and be a capitalist. Like
That is not true. That is not true.
It is. You can be ethical, but if you're saying that I'm going to take an idea, I'm going to exploit it, and that's capitalism, you didn't do it. Somebody's going to leave it there on the table. I did it. And so now what? Just because they are black now, oh my God, I shouldn't have done. Well, black person, we need to think about the opportunity for us to do the same thing.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that with respect to monetization. A good example of that would be someone we talked about in one of the previous episodes concerning this was Issa Rae, with what she has been able to do with the intellectual property of her assets and starting on YouTube with that limited series and taking that series and taking that intellectual property and then developing it into something that transcends different platforms.
So I think that her model obviously is good. And there's been a lot of examples of people doing that. And so it's more about owning your own platform, distribution, anything that you can control, you should try and control. I mean, you can even set up your own server. I think my nephew could do one. But, that's not always, people don't have the capital for that. But they can host their own server. They can do that. They can do a hybrid approach where they own the emails, they own the distribution, they own all of these things. So that they make it difficult for someone to come in and take from them or to minimize what they're doing and maximize, what the other person's doing and maximize what you're doing, right? So if you control the distribution, you control a lot of the IP, you control your server. I'm not reliant on a YouTube to make my content less than someone else's. I have a little bit more control is what I'm saying. And there are opportunities to do that. And again, creating your own server, it can maybe out of people's reach because it does require capital. It does require a lot of knowledge. Again, if I gave my nephew a lot of money, I'm quite confident he can develop his own server. But he does host content on his own server, right? So he uses stuff in the cloud and he hosts like his games and things on his server. That's his.
Yeah, but you have to be, in order to do that, you have to be technically savvy.
You have to be technically inclined, but you also have to be collaborative, right? I know what I know and I know what I don't know. I'm not trying to go in there and start doing math with people. I'm not going to try and be Sacagawea and try and put people on a tour. We're going to end up in who knows? We don't know. So I know that there are limitations in my skill set, but I am also willing to admit that and look for people that can fill in those gaps, and I collaborate. And so looking for those thought partners, opening yourself up to have a trusted advisor, those are the things that, look at Michael Dell. He started Dell in his garage, but he had people that could help him with the parts that he wasn't so great at. And so you look at Vine, and I'm sure somebody created this, but they didn't have, maybe they didn't, I don't know this obviously because I just heard of Vine, that they didn't have the skill set to write a business plan or a business proposal to get that capital. You find someone that does that. Especially if you're going to like a Howard or an HBCU, apparently you people, that's right, I said it, have this network that you can reach out to. And so for us, a lot of times we like to keep things, and this is a generalization, huge generalization, like to keep things within the community or not share things because of trust, because of whatever. I don't know what it is, but I'm saying that we're going to have to look for an opportunity to expand our networks and trust more so that we keep that capital in the community. We open it up globally, but we're keeping the capital and the knowledge and those creative things in the community, but expanding out and making the money.
Yeah, I'm going to push back there a little bit because I think that I agree with what you're saying. I do believe that those things exist. They have existed for hundreds of years in terms of the culture and blacks relying on each other to either support their business or to partnership up and expand businesses. I do agree with you that the capturing of the content and the ability to be able to then use that content as fuel for other things is something that we have to do a better job at. And I'm happy that we are seeing aspects of that, especially with respect to YouTube space, the Spotify space, the podcast space, where you have these creatives that are creating series that are then being licensed out. They're not going to a Netflix asking Netflix for a deal. They're going to a Netflix, they're going to an Amazon with content and with full libraries. And they're saying, we're going to license aspects of this library to you. And you're just one of the platforms that we're using. We're going to use you for this in terms of the visual rights. We're going to use Spotify possibly for the audio rights. We're going to work with Amazon possibly for the media rights in terms of films. And we're going to work with someone with respect to radio and books and things of that sort. So they're going to them as, in some ways, full media companies.
In order to do that, you have to be thoughtful on the onset, right? And so making sure that, go back to the portable, having portable assets, that it's not tied to a YouTube platform. It's not tied to Facebook. I have that on my own. So I can take those assets and I can do the things that you're saying. And then making sure, again, that you own the intellectual property. So if I own this intellectual property that's portable and I have it in courses, toolkits, whatever I have it in, I'm then able to monetize it and I control the distribution of it. I'm not reliant on someone else to do that. I have more autonomy to do it when I own things and I make sure that my assets are portable.
Are you familiar with this guy is called, I think it's FD Signifier. He just released, I think it was last week, like a 4-hour documentary on Tyler Perry. And apparently it's supposed to be very, very good. And it's one that's on my radar to use. He is doing something extremely innovative with respect to this lane, and is speaking to or doing what it is that you just talked about with respect to not only controlling the IP and controlling the content, but more importantly, making certain that he's doing some creative things.
I'm not familiar with it and I haven't heard of it, but this is something, having ownership of the content, even purchasing content, right? So that's one of the things I have a problem with these streaming networks, that I don't own shit. I paid for it. Think about my audiobooks, right? So back in the day, I would lend my books to people. Here, you should read this. With an audiobook, I'm paying the exact same amount, but I can't lend it to anyone. I don't own it. If Audible today decided, you know what, you're out, or we're closing, I don't have anything. My music, I don't own anything. I'm renting and leasing everything. And so as a creative, when I keep my content locked into a platform, I don't own anything. I'm just renting and leasing. And when they decide that they didn't like something that you said, or they decide, you know what, we're going to pack up and move to the Bahamas and we're done with this, you've lost everything.
So who do we have to blame for that?
Ourselves. And I don't say blame. I don't say blame. I say that there is this is one of my favorite things to say, an opportunity for improvement. There is an opportunity, but people don't know there's an opportunity to improve unless we discuss it, right?
Correct. I will say that we've allowed ourselves to get comfortable and soft, and the comfort level in terms of you receiving your audiobooks and not having to go to Barnes and Noble and not having
Barnes
to
and
go
Noble.
to Borders. You remember Borders?
And right, and just a little thing, just aside for the people. I love a physical book. I love everything about a physical book. But sometimes when I'm out and about, I want an audiobook. I can't walk and read a book. I can barely walk and chew gum. So that's out. So it's the convenience of it, but I don't own it. And I don't know if we have automatically become soft. I think that we were always hopeful. We were always thinking that people, corporations, governments some of them had our best interests. They don't. They're all self-serving. So, oh my God, I think I've become jaded. We need to become more self-serving.
I take your point there. I think that this series, in terms of the conversations that have been happening over the course of the weeks, have shown that Black folk, we have to do a better job with respect to ownership and understanding our power. And this episode was the culmination of trying to understand the different aspects of how it is that we started, what policies were put in place to help try to level the playing field in some aspects, and how we now can't depend on the political aspect because individuals have said, oh, you've achieved a little too much. We can't have Lynn be the CEO.
I don't agree with that all the way. I don't agree with it all the way.
I will say this because I do agree also, or do believe also, that in a lot of ways, Black folk, brown folk, Asian folk, and I guess that would be brown as well, we're sort of in the middle of a family fight that we didn't ask to be in the middle of. And that family fight is happening between Chad and Becky. And Chad is going, Becky, I need you to be home. I need you to be pregnant. I need you to be cooking my meal and feeding my kids. You've used this DEI thing to become the CEO in this company, to go out and vote, to go out and wear your pink pussy hats and things of that sort. And you've gotten a little too high on the hog. I'm going to start pulling some of those things back. And I think that's the movement that where we find ourselves. And unfortunately, we're collateral damage in a lot of this stuff.
I don't think we are collateral damage. I think that we're part of the entire package, right? Mm-hmm. So if we can keep Becky home and pregnant, then our numbers will not be out. We won't be outnumbered by minorities, right? Mm-hmm. And so we keep our buying power. I don't think we're ancillary. I don't think we're collateral damage. I think that we are part of it. I think that we are an integral part of it. Becky may be collateral damage. I think that's probably it. And when I say this, it's like, this is a horrible thing to say. Kids, don't listen to me. I'm going to say it anyway. When mommy and daddy are fighting and they're going through a divorce, you need to take care of yourself. This isn't your fight. It's not your fight. So take care of yourself. And right now for us, this isn't our fight. It could be about us, but I'm not going to sit there and wait for the fallout between Chad and Becky. I'm taking care of myself.
Well, on that note, we'll end as we begin with respect to what we talked about is the shadow equity part. And we talked about the fact that it's not about the culture, it's not about the policy, it's not about platform, it's about value and whether or not Black folk traditionally have felt valued with what it is and how it is that we are being treated and what we're bringing to the table.
I think we need to move away from the feelings and the hoping and start getting into action. And so I know that's weird coming from me, Miss Touchy-Feely, Kumbaya, my lord, but all of this hoping someone's going to take care of us, feeling like, please just value me. Get over it. Don't move because he said he loved you. Don't do anything. Take care of yourself. Unless you have equity in something, it ain't happening. You need to think about yourself as a business and what's best for you. The feelings aren't going to feed you. The feelings aren't going to set you up for success. The feelings will not create generational wealth. Start doing for yourself as the CEO of your business.
Okay, on that note, I have nothing else to add.
I know you don't. I'm done.
What do you have planned for this week?
Same as last week. Whole lot of nothing. I'm still purging, and I did a huge sage of the house, and so I'm super excited about what the new year's going to bring. I'm coming off of my financial diet. My whole house smells like sage, but it's good. And you?
Welcoming some new additions to the family. Guys, while you're out and about this week, make the time to do something nice for yourself. While you're at it, take the time to do something nice for someone else. Until next time.
And that's a wrap. Thank you for listening and spending your time with us on I Take Your Point. For more unfiltered conversations like this, click the link in the description. Huge thank you to our production team. We couldn't do this without you. Quick disclaimer, the views shared are those of the host and guest and are for informational purposes only, not professional advice. Keep building your own table, take care, and be well.